All right, welcome.
And welcome to you who have come to ZomboCall.
We're going to continue from where we left off in the previous video, which was setting up LiteDB, a NoSQL database to work with Godot. So far, we have the database created in this game database DB file. So whenever this project runs, it's going to add this character or, skip that step since it's already in there. So moving on from that point, we're still in this database handler C# script. First thing we're going to do is add a method to get the character back in JSON format. So the reason we do that is just so we can communicate between Godot and C# in the back end. We want public string get character JSON. We're going to pass in the character name. And so this is going to query for that character name. So just put no result, whatever you want. This bson mapper is part of LiteDB, and it's going to just convert the query result to a document, which is just a row essentially in a NoSQL database. So the character collection, this is the collection or table that we're storing in. We're only going to have use for one returning. This is fine. Same query as the dupe check. So there we go. So this is going to, again, give us the result of the query in BSON document format, which is just how LiteDB stores stuff under the hood. BSON is just JSON with extra metadata or data type information. But as long as we know how to convert it, that's what we need to know. So we're going to return the result of that, but in JSON format. So the way we do that is LiteDB has a method to handle that. It's JSON serializer. Serialize that BSON document result. So there we go. Now this will then, so we do a query by the character name, we get a basically a JSON file back that has all of the stats. So that will then be useful to Godot. So like when, if you're in GDScript, we'll handle that later, you'll be able to use that JSON result and you'll be able to update the actual character object. So while we're in here, we're also going to have an update character method. This is to update it directly in the database. The way we do that is going to basically reverse this process we just talked about. So we're still going to pass in the character name, and we're also going to pass in character JSON. Now this character JSON so like if you were writing, in your game code or whatever, give me the current character results by doing this. You might want to modify that JSON and then send it back. So like you're going to pass in the character name and the modified JSON if you're going, if you were changing the statistics, player got hit, whatever it is. So to do that, we're going to actually not going to call that JSON. So this is C# object. That'll become clear in a moment. So we're going to use, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, we're going to use Newtonsoft JSON to convert from JSON format to this C# class that we've made. If you need, I should go over how to do that. So here's the NuGet package. It's just the same as the LiteDB itself. You grab this XML in the package reference, and then in this C# project file, I've already done it here, you can see, but you just paste that right there and then save it, and then it'll in Visual Studio Code it'll pop up restore. Any decent IDE should be able to resolve any dependencies. And then so you see that up here, it's not giving me an error because we have that dependency there now. So that's it. JSON convert is the method here. And we're going to deserialize object. Now you see there's this one with the brackets, that's the generic type. So that's the type you're deserializing to. So we're going to put in the C# class we created, and that's going to give us, from the JSON, it's going to give us the C# object because it has, these fields will match the JSON fields that we're passing in here. And this, so that's the type, then you give it the actual JSON. So that's our C# class. And now we need to also get the item from the database. So character to update. We're going to query the collection, find one, blah, 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 just wherever the name matches the character name we passed in. Now now this part is key as well. So in the last tutorial, I also mentioned like, why are we adding in this, this class needs to have this field, this LiteDB object ID, because that's going to be necessary to do an update to the database. So what we're going to do here, we've basically, like, these are the same thing for the most part. This is a C# object that you could just insert here, and this is the C# object that we've queried from the database. So now what we want to know what ID is the one that the one that we got back from the query. So it's stored as a bson value. I'm just going to call it item ID. And character to update. And there you see that's available because it's in our class. It would still exist even without that by LiteDB doing it under the hood, but we need it to do this update. So this is storing the ID of the query result. So we know, like, it's a record of which character we want to update. So now what we want to do is we want to pass the object we got from our JSON. So these are the updated values, and this is the one that's currently in the database. So what we want to do is set the character to update equal to the C# object. Now what that's going to do is pretty obvious. It's going to make these exactly the same, but with the updated values, and we're not going to have the database ID field here stored in this original object from the JSON. So that's why we're keeping this here, so we can give it back, so to speak. So if we go to character to update ID, we're going to set that equal to the item ID that we got from the one that we queried. So now this character to update C# object it has the ID of the character in the database, and it has the updated values that we passed in from this statement here. So once we have that done, we just perform the update, and this is how we do that. So the update result, and this is, so when we do an update, it's just LiteDB is going to return a value like saying whether or not it succeeded or whether it found anything to update. So update, character to update, and that'll do it. And so at that point, we're done. We've updated with the JSON traits that we passed in. And now we can just log this database update result, just so we know. And that way in the log we'll confirm that it actually deal directly with the database. So what we want now is an abstraction layer so that we can easily call this stuff from Godot or GDScript. And to do that, we're going to add another class. I should say script, both, whatever. New script, and we're going to make this one in GDScript. And let's call it database abstraction layer. Here we go. One thing we need to do is get things in dictionary format as well, from the JSON to the dictionary. So let's get character stats dictionary and pass in the character. So what we want to do is, so we're going to pass in the actual stats from the object. So in this case, on the player object, remember we have this stats object and this script attached to it, which has these values. We're going to get that into a dictionary format. So stats, I'm going to get the character, and again, this is going to be the actual character object. Get node stats. So again, that's the stats node. And then we want a dictionary. So I'm going to start with an empty one, like so. Now we need the properties we defined in the character script. So the script itself, so not just the stats object, but that script that is attached to the script. And GDScript does have this. This is one of the things that's more annoying in C# actually. So we take the stats object, the node, and then get script. And that will give us the properties just that we defined in that script, or access to them at least. Okay, so one of the properties of the script is the name of the script itself. So we don't really want to include that. So like if I just get script, the first property I believe is just going to be, you know, character base.gd. I don't want to, that's not one of our stats up here. So I want to skip that one. So what I want here is a programmatic way to determine if we're on that property with the script name. And the script path is part of the, it's one of the variables on the script itself. So what we can do is get script path equals script get path. So what that's going to return is actually the, res scripts database and, whatever the script is. So that will include the name of the script, and that's what we're going to skip when we're going to loop through these. So the properties, script get script property list. Again, this is another one that's easier in GDScript. So now we want to iterate over all of the properties, and those properties are going to be what we defined in character-based GD here. All of those, and like I said, including the path, which we don't want. So now when we do that loop, and so we can do that like so. Properties size is just going to give us. This is going to give us. I should have mentioned that this is actually going to return a dictionary, this property list. So now we're going to use the dictionary size to indicate like how many we're going to go through this loop. And here's where we're going to skip the path. Properties, on this iteration, if the name in script path, and this is very similar to Python as well. So what this means is if the name is found anywhere in the path, which it will be because it's the name of the file, we're going to just skip this loop iteration, I should say, because we don't want to store that. So now we want to actually get those values and add it to our dictionary up here that we defined. So property name, this is going to be the name, meaning, strength, agility, stamina, magic, any of those names. And we're going to set that to, darn it, properties name, and that's similar in this dictionary. It returns as well. So we're going to set the name to the name, pretty straightforward, and the value of the property. So again, the numbers over here. We're going to stats get, and get is a GDScript method to get the value of the dictionary item that we're on. So we're going to get property, and we're passing in the property name. Whoops, no semicolon in GScript. So stats dictionary property name equals the value that we just grabbed. This is a little redundant, I know, but just to explicitly skip that file name. So what that'll do is every property on the stats node of that character is now going to be in this stats dictionary. So now we do need, when we're updating the database, we do need the character's name. So we're going to add that here. So this is just saying, we're going to create a name in the dictionary, and we're going to set the value to the character's name. And this is going to be really the node's name. So if we name, let's actually do this here. So if I name this node player 1, and that's what's in the database, so like that lines up, then when we pass this player into this method, it's going to get those stats, set those stats, and then set the name to the node name. You could store that, like I mentioned this in the first video, you could store it like in the actual database as well, but it's just, it's a 6 of this, half dozen of the other type of thing. And then we're going to return that stats dictionary. And the reason I'm putting an underscore here is it's kind of a, I don't know if it's a general practice. I know Godot mentions it. Like when you prefix a method with an underscore, it's what you want to do for an internal method. And I don't always follow that, but in like this is a good example where we will get benefit out of just organizationally separating stuff that's going to be called from inside the script and stuff that's going to be called from outside the script. So the next bit of this, we're going to be kind of extending what we did here in the C# script. So this is going to give us the JSON back. Now we want to get it into a Godot dictionary. So this is going to be the the intermediate step here. This also is going to be an internal one because we're going to create just load character from database, save character to database. We want to be able to call that in a simple fashion. So database to character dictionary. Pass in the character, and this is going to be a simple one. We're going to get the JSON, and the way we do that is the method we just created, get character JSON, and same thing, we're going to pass in the node name like I was talking about up here. And then this, so this is going to be Godot's parser. So this will parse the JSON we got back from the database and return let's actually put that returns dictionary. So that's going to return a Godot dictionary, which we can then use to update the actual game object if we want to. And one more like this. Whoa. So we're going to pass in the character because, again, if we're going to load to the character object, we're going to need to know which character object we're doing, and then the dictionary. So like whatever we get back from this, we can pass to this. And what that will do is it'll let us actually update the character object in Godot. So again, we need to get the actual stats object we're going after, just as a refresher, within this node, and so we can update those values over here. So the stats object, same as before, with the character we passed in, we're going to go get node %stats to get it by name. So then we have the object again. So this, we're going to simply set the character stats object, that property. We're going to set it equal to the dictionary value. Okay, so that takes care of the internal stuff. So now what we want to do is use that stuff that we've created, this in the C#, this in the C#, and these internal methods that we're using to use as go-betweens. Now we want to be able to create methods to actually just pass in something, save it, or pass in something and load it to the character. So let's create the method. So we just pass in a character node, player one. We're going to pass it into this. The character dictionary is going to use the method we just create. Database to character dictionary. So that's going to get the statistics from the database character. And then we're going to load character stats from the dictionary that we just got from that. And just pass in the character and the dictionary that we just got. So again, we're going to talk to the database to get the current values, and then we're going to load those current values onto the character object like we just discussed here. And this way, you just call it from this method. And then we want to do the reverse. Pass in the character, pass in the character dictionary. Oh man, talking in C# again. So we need this in JSON format. So we have the Godot Godot dictionary object And then we need to convert that to JSON to pass it to the database. So character JSON, I think this is built into Godot as well. So pass the dictionary. And of course, this will be the dictionary with the new values that we want to store. And then go to our database handler, update character. And they need the name, of course, because this is what they're going to query by, and like what the method is going to query by. So same thing, we're taking the name of the node to pass in as the character name, which is then going to be what we query the database for here. And that's how it's going to identify it. And then pass in the character JSON, which is going to have the new values. Okay, so now what we want to do is, now that we've got these methods in place, we're going to actually try to load the values from the database. So before, we've got this stats object, and when I press play, it's loading, 4,500 out of 6,000 up here, just because that's what I've set in the character object that I've saved. So we want to actually grab it from the database right now. So in order to do this, we actually have to augment this a little bit. This is actually updating the stats. So as far as the game object is concerned, the stats will be updated, but we haven't shown it in the text. And there's another issue with this too, because the game object, recall, does not have this ID. So it's, and in fact, also the name, it's not storing the name. So we need to skip those when we're going through this dictionary. So we can do that easily. Just a little check here. If the stat, so is either, whoops, this needs to be an array, because it'll basically, this will say if the stat isn't anything in this array text wise. Okay, so that'll skip if the stat is either that ID or the name, because again, the name isn't stored in the GD script one. So that'll skip over those two, and otherwise it will set the stat to such and such here. Now let's get out of the loop. Now we want to set the HP text. So let's get the actual game object there. The character we passed in, get the node HP label, just like we called it in here, right there. So that'll give us that object, and now we need to set the text. So in Godot, there's a method specifically for that. So here's the object, HP text, set text, and then in here we just put whatever we want the text to be. So we need the character dictionary, and then the HP, add the slash in here, and then character dictionary, HP max. And that might already be a string, but just to make sure, I'm gonna, no, actually it should be a number, so we do need to convert it to a string by doing this. And there we go. That should then skip these, update the actual stats object, and then set the HP text to whatever it is in the database. So again, here's the database view of it. We have 3,000 and 6,000. And originally we were setting it to whatever I had at 4,200. So now if we run this, it should update this text to be 3,000. So let's cross our fingers. Hooray. All right, so there we go. So we got this out of the database, and that's one of the things we're going for here. So what more could you want? Okay, so you want to update the database too. That's fair. We want to be able to go both ways. So just to demonstrate the functionality, let's add a button. There we go. And over here, if we go into this node here, we have pressed, and we can double click that to add the event. But actually, before we do that, I'm going to add a script to the actual scene here, because we've been doing it from the player node, just to kind of give a good example. So let's put a script on the spatial root here, this just to give the semblance of a manager script. We'll just call it that for now, no big deal. GD script is fine. So there, now we've got this script existing. Now let's go to the button and add this event. We will add it to this spatial root node. And here we have on button pressed. So let's kind of visually separate that. So what we're going to need first is the player node itself. And let's see, so let me do the same thing here and allow this to be accessed by the name. Save me some headache. And let's get that object. Player node equals get node. Again, and in this case, it's going to be the period is going to return this, just like whatever node the script is on. And then again, within that node, get node player one. No semicolon. And let's find that button before I go too much further. So to look at the button that we've added, I'm going to just go to the 2D view here. It's not very useful in that sense here, so let's make it a little bigger. Let's put some text in, test button. There we go. Let me make sure that exists. There we go, test button. Test it, nothing broke. We're in good shape so far. All right, so we've got the player node. So database abstraction layer, get stats dictionary, character stats dictionary, and we will pass in the character, which in this case is this player node. So this is going to return the stats dictionary right here. And then we're going to pass that in here along with the character in order to save those stats when we're ready. So, okay, so let's say stats dictionary. Now we want to change some values, right? So let's do that. Let's since this is a dictionary, you can just kind of do it. At this point, you'll know what you're messing with. So let's say we're going to mess with the HP. Don't know why we would pick that since we can see it. So we're going to say that, and then let's give it a new value. Let's say we just injured the player and we just brought him down to 2800 HP. So this is our new dictionary. So then we'll go to the layer again, save the character stats to the database, and pass in the character, which is the player node, and the stats dictionary, which we have now updated. So what that's going to do is make sure that it's updated in the database. That's not going to display it on the HP, but let's test that aspect of it first. We're going to save this. So right now, let's just run this again just to be sure. So right now the database has 3,000. So I'm going to disconnect from this and then run this. And when I press this button, I should update the database. Let's make sure no errors, it looks like. Connect, put in the dumb password. And let's have a look at our characters table. Hey, here we go. So 2800, nice. So let me put that back to, let's actually put it to a new value. Since we're having fun updating values, commit, and that'll show that. Great, so let's go back here. And there's that 3500, since again, when we start this, remember the player script is loading it from the database, so then we, whatever we change it to, that's what it's doing. So let's do one more test. So like if pretend we're actually in the game and you want to update this stuff, let's actually update the character object as well. So again, we're going to load character from database. All we have to do is pass in the character here, and it should have everything updated now. So now when we press the test button, we're going to set the HP to 2800. We're going to save that to the database, which we've already shown to work. And then we're going to load the character stats from the database. So that's going to put it back on the player node. And as we defined, it's going to update the HP text as well. So there we go. I'm going to hit test. All right. And there we go. And obviously, if you were to take this a step further, if I just this is a test button, you could also, you know, minus equals it, just to, except that's a lot of damage. So let's say we want to take away 100 HP from that stat, then we don't have to, just do a static thing for a test. I did save that. Yep. So let's try one more time. So yep, 2800, since that was what was saved in the database, so it persisted. Test. Let's hurt our poor player, but yep, it keeps going on. And obviously, when you implement this, you will want to place limits on it in your code to say like don't drop below 0, but that's all standard stuff. Now we have this stored in a database and can talk back and forth.